Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the heavily documented, totally bizarre, and highly classified history of Soviet UFO investigations. We're going to separate internet fiction from historical fact by looking straight at the declassified paper trails left by the KGB and the Soviet military. Trust me, the truth we're looking at today is way stranger than fiction. So, what exactly turned 23 Soviet soldiers into stone? If you've been online recently, you've probably seen this crazy headline-grabbing story making the rounds about a declassified CIA document. The claim is wild. An extraterrestrial spaceship appears over a Soviet military base in Ukraine. Someone allegedly fires a surface-to-air missile at it, the craft crashes, and when the surviving aliens get out, they merge into this massive, glowing sphere that bursts with light. And that light? It instantly turned 23 human soldiers into solid limestone. It's an absolutely terrifying image, and it completely captivated the internet. But as always, we've got to look at the actual sources. Experts, including former CIA agent Tracy Walder, swiftly debunked this wild story. Yes, a document does exist in the archives, but it was really just a translated tabloid article from the Weekly World News and a Ukrainian newspaper. It just happened to end up in a government archive. It is absolutely not an authentic CIA intelligence report and definitely not a verified historical event. So rest assured, no soldiers were actually turned into limestone. But here's the thing. While the Stone Soldier story might be pure tabloid fiction, the actual declassified paper trail of Soviet aerospace research into unidentified phenomena, it's just as staggering, maybe even more so, simply because it actually happened. Kapustin Yar, often called the Russian Roswell. Founded way back in 1946, Kapustin Yar was a highly secretive Soviet rocket launch site and cosmodrome in the Astrakhan region. Now, to give you some context, it was initially built using captured Nazi V-2 rocket technology. The place was so classified that an entire nearby city, built just to house its workers, was completely wiped off public maps. Over the decades, Kapustin Yar became heavily associated with numerous, highly credible UFO sightings by military personnel, and that's exactly how it earned its legendary nickname, the Russian Roswell. Opening the blue folder, the declassified KGB files. There is a seriously long, remarkable history of high-level Soviet interest in UFOs. Let's look at the timeline. In 1946, Kapustin Yar is founded. By 1948, Joseph Stalin himself is asking his top rocket scientist, Sergei Korolev, to evaluate the American Roswell incident. Fast forward to 1968, and 13 of the leading Soviet aircraft designers officially ask the government to study UFOs. Then, in 1978, the Ministry of Defense kicks off a massive nationwide study. Finally, in 1991, the KGB releases its findings. This entire timeline directly contradicts the Soviet Union's official public stance, which totally dismissed UFOs as nonsense. Behind closed doors, they were absolutely obsessed. So, what was actually in that 1991 release? Well, it became known as the KGB's Blue Folder, and it was handed over to a prominent Soviet cosmonaut named Pavel Popovich. We're talking about 124 pages of classified encounters, all filed by high-ranking military commanders and authorities. It detailed some incredible events, like a massive panic at Kapustin Yar in 1989 where military personnel literally watched a UFO hover right over their base, or a bizarre 1987 incident where an emerald cloud with purple traces showed up on radar and was chased by military aircraft over the Tixi Peninsula. Project Thread 3, the official military study. Starting in 1978, a Ministry of Defense program led by Colonel Boris Sokolov literally turned the entire Soviet military into a giant UFO listening post for 10 straight years. Every single unit was ordered to report anomalies, and they were looking for 3 specific criteria. First, unpredictable movement. Second, sheer velocity. And third, radar invisibility, meaning these things could be seen with the naked eye but wouldn't show up on radar, or vice versa. The underlying Soviet goal here was pretty straightforward. Figure out how to reverse engineer this technology and win the Cold War. But, as you can imagine, this pursuit was incredibly dangerous. It actually resulted in a chilling standing order. Do not fire. Colonel Sokolov noted 40 different episodes where Russian fighter planes were scrambled to intercept these unknowns. Usually, the UFOs would just zip away. But in 3 highly documented cases where Soviet MiGs actually fired their weapons at the craft, the planes inexplicably fell out of the sky. 2 pilots died. After that happened, the Soviet Air Defense Forces immediately changed their standing orders to pilots. The new rule: if you see a UFO, change course and get out of there. The 1982 ICBM incident. Picture this. It's October 4th, 1982. A group of silent, glowing, shape-shifting objects, some looked triangular, some elliptical, suddenly appear in the night sky right above the Usavo Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Base in Ukraine. For 4 agonizing hours, these objects just hovered and maneuvered directly over the nuclear facility. And this wasn't an isolated sighting. It was witnessed by dozens of military personnel, including several high-ranking officers. And then, the absolute unthinkable happens. Deep down in the bunker, the launch control panels for the nuclear missiles suddenly and inexplicably activate on their own. Proper launch codes are actually being entered into the system, but there is no human hand touching the dials. The panicked Russian officers are frantically trying to shut the system down, but they realize they are completely locked out of their own controls. The missiles become fully armed. Literally, World War III is seconds away from starting, and these highly trained Russian commanders are completely powerless to stop it. And then, poof, the UFOs just suddenly vanish from the sky above. At the exact moment they disappear, the control panels down in the bunker revert back to normal, and the nuclear weapons instantly deactivate. Investigators from Moscow, including Colonel Sokolov himself, rushed to the base. They completely tore apart the control panels, looking for a short circuit or a glitch, but they found absolutely zero systems defects. In the official files, Sokolov described the event as a spontaneous illumination of all displays. The truly terrifying conclusion reached by the Ministry of Defense was that these UFOs had intentionally seized control of the nuclear missiles, just to send a very deliberate message. A reverse engineering race for the ultimate tech. Through all of this, the overarching goal for the Soviets was to gain a massive technological edge. The declassified records actually contain testimony regarding top Soviet scientists, like physicist Dr. Rimily Avramenko, who worked on anti-satellite weapons. According to the source material, Avramenko demonstrated this incredible plasma beam generator. It was a tabletop model that was capable of instantly burning a hole right through a razor blade. Avramenko and his colleagues allegedly referred to this technology as the weapon of the aliens. They explicitly stated that data gathered from observing UFOs directly aided their own plasma beam research. Even top Russian scientists involved in these programs, like Dr. Yuri Platov, who actually considered himself a major skeptic, admitted something pretty profound. He noted that while 90% of the thousands of UFO sightings they analyzed were easily explainable phenomena, a persistent 10% were entirely unexplained anomalies. And it was exactly this unexplainable 10% that the Soviet military aggressively went after, desperately hoping to unlock a world-changing technological advantage. All of this brings us to a really stark historical contradiction. Publicly, for decades, the USSR confidently declared that UFOs were simply a Western propaganda distraction designed just to justify higher defense budgets. They actively discouraged any public interest. But their secret reality? It was the exact opposite. They were running a 10-year nationwide military study, ordering every single military unit to report sightings and funneling massive resources into reverse engineering the phenomena. So they told the public one thing while deeply investigating the mystery in the shadows. Which leaves us with a final, really provocative thought to chew on. Are we alone in the universe, or just locked in a secret race for the ultimate technology? The declassified Soviet files show us a superpower that was both terrified by and totally obsessed with what they were seeing in their skies. They didn't know exactly what these objects were, but they knew they were real, they knew they were vastly superior, and they desperately wanted to figure out how they worked. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions and keep learning.